Everybody, in today's video, I want to talk about a subject that I thought was so interesting, and it's actually a psychological study to be able to determine with 94% accuracy whether or not your relationship is going to last. If you're checking off the box saying, yes, this is your relationship, then there's a high probability that your relationship may not last. You see these things popping up in your relationship. This could actually provide a great opportunity for you and your partner to be able to discuss these things and see if it is something that you guys can overcome together to be a happy, healthy couple. The first key point in predicting whether or not a relationship is going to last is talking about criticism. And when we're talking about criticism, it is how criticism about a partner is spoken about. Let's say your partner has a busy day. They're driving around, they're using your car for the day, and they use your entire tank of gas and bring it back home without filling up the tank of gas. Somebody might say, my partner is so selfish. They did not fill up the tank of gas. They only think about themselves. I cannot believe that they are that selfish of a person that they don't even consider me. That is one way of portraying a criticism where you're actually defining globally that this person that you are talking about is a selfish person, rather than dissecting that incident as a series of events that led a person to the conclusion of them not bringing home your tank full of gas. A healthier way of communicating about this would be actually to just talk about the incident, talk about what led up to it, and try to create understanding between the couples, an understanding of the pair of the situation, so that you can understand why things happened the way they did, rather than just criticizing the partner globally as having some type of character trait. The next predictor of relationship failure is actually defensiveness. And I find this one very interesting because I made another video on this channel talking about assertiveness and how one of the key components and strategies to being assertive is actually to not be defensive. To not be defensive and to be willing to intake every single criticism that somebody might have about you without actually being emotionally affected by it, but rather understanding what they are trying to say. Defensiveness will come when somebody is trying to deflect blame, say it wasn't their fault, say something that hadn't happened. Whenever a situation has come up in the relationship where there's tension, they're either not going to accept responsibility, they're going to deflect it on you, or they're going to deflect it on somebody else, and they're going to get very defensive and not actually allow themselves to accept and to take responsibility for whatever part they played in the events that led up to the stressful situation, regardless of what that event was. It is actually a non-defensive behavior and willingness and openness to listen that will allow people to listen to each other and therefore come to healthy conclusions together and be able to overcome stressful situations as a unit. The next psychological predictor of whether or not a relationship is going to fail is stonewalling, and this relationship behavior is most commonly produced by males. So this relationship predictor is called stonewalling because essentially what you're going to do, you're going to build up a brick wall between the two of you. You're going to make it impossible to communicate with the other person by emotionally removing yourself from the situation, by getting yourself to not care, by getting yourself to remove emotions from the situation. You have now built a stone wall where the other person, no matter what they are attempting to do, no matter what they're going through in their attempts to communicate with you, the stone wall is the tactic used to avoid all interaction inside of the relationship by completely disengaging emotionally from the relationship. And now we're going to talk about the biggest predictor of relationship failure, which is contempt. Contempt comes from either a long-term buildup of emotional damage and psychological baggage that is developed inside of a relationship that was not expressed and released healthily earlier in the relationship, and therefore creating contempt and hate between partners even. And contempt as not seeing your partner as the same footing as you. Now it can go both ways. Either the male or female may look down upon the other partner, and by looking down upon the other partner, you're no longer seeing each other on equal footing. And because you don't see each other on equal footing, you don't have mutual respect for each other. And because there is no mutual respect for each other, there is no mutual love for each other over the long term. And that is why contempt is the #1 predictor of relationship failure in the future. When that happens, essentially a psychological power imbalance is starting to happen where it is difficult for the couple to function together as a couple. So that does it for the 4 main psychological predictors of relationship failure. If you're experiencing any of these inside of your relationship, or maybe you're just curious and you want to know in the future, it's very important to be aware of these traits, because most of us want a long-term, healthy, happy relationship that is full of quality in life and adds to the quality of our own lives. But with that said, I actually want to give you an extra little bonus tip that I found to be very useful when I was in my relationship that I've talked about previously on this channel, and I was having a very difficult time deciding whether or not it was going to be something that was going to be suitable for me long term. It was actually this idea of writing down the amount of positive to negative interactions you have inside of a relationship. Now I remember hearing about this all the way like back in middle school. I remember it was like my leadership teacher that brought this up to me, and I thought it was so interesting. And what my teacher was talking about is how the ideal ratio of positive to negative interactions inside of a relationship is 7-to-1. Here's what we mean by that. For every 7 positive interactions you have in a relationship, you have 1 negative interaction in a relationship. Now, many relationships, including the ones studied, had a ratio of positive to negative interactions that was able to predict the longevity of their relationships. The relationships that had a ratio of 4-to-1 or lower were essentially like doomed to fail, right? For every 4 positive interactions, you have 1 negative interaction. That relationship is actually too negative to be able to survive the long-term test of time. Now, anything that is 5 positive interactions to 1 negative interaction was generally deemed to do well over the long periods of time. But what I also thought was interesting was hearing about how some relationships can actually be too positive. And this is where you get to the extreme scale of 11 positive interactions to 1 negative interaction. And the reason why some psychologists believe that having a relationship that is too positive, that is over the 11-to-1 ratio, is because essentially you're going to be with somebody that is not going to tussle with you, not going to go back and forth with you, not going to help you grow as a person. Therefore, if you start taking notice of how many positive to negative interactions you have in your relationship, this is going to be a very good predictor to help you out in your relationship long term. I've mentioned before, I actually did this when I was in my previous relationship and I was dating my ex-girlfriend at the time, and I remember our relationship got so bad at one point, I think like we had 4 negative interactions to every 1 positive interaction. That was definitely towards the end, and a lot of other things were going on, but it was definitely an indicator to me at that time that it was definitely ready to move forward in life. So I want to encourage you, if you're in a negative relationship and maybe you're struggling, it's going to be okay. Everything will work out just fine. It's going to be tough, but you can have the strength to move on forward regardless of that pain that you're going through. And if you're in one of these positive relationships and everything's going awesome, I'm happy for you. Keep it going. I think that's amazing, and I wish you the very best of luck. Cool. That does it. Thank you for watching this video. Hit subscribe, and I'll see you on the next one.